On today's show, we'll be breaking down one of the top hauls of the 2024 NHL draft class, as well as one of the top prospect pools in the NHL with a deep dive on the Montreal Canadiens.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. My name is Sebastian Hage, the Director of European Scouting over at Dauber Prospects, typically joined by Hage, who is currently still out with illness, but will hopefully be back for next week's shows. Today, we're going to be diving deep into the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool, as well as their very exciting 2024 NHL draft class from Vegas, with a certain selection made by an unknown Quebec artist named Céline Dion, which was a rather exciting thing to experience at the Sphere out there in the Nevada desert. But before we jump into the show today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So, the Montreal Canadiens. This is the NHL team that I'm most familiar with, having grown up in Montreal. And they have been absolutely hoarding prospects for about the last half decade at this point. And the 2024 NHL draft class was no exception to that. And while a lot of their depth selections in that draft class were very much the swings on their guys, rather than the guys that public scouts or public rankings had very high up in the draft, their first round selection gave this draft class an immediate A or A plus grade for me. They had the best day one of any team, in my opinion, even though they had some stark competition there. I mean, the Calgary Flames landing Zane Parekh was fantastic, as well as the Minnesota Wild getting Zeev Buium at 12th overall. But the raw upside that was acquired by the Montreal Canadiens there on draft day in Las Vegas was unrivaled, in my opinion. At 5th overall, they got, for me, the second best player in this draft class by a long shot. Ivan Demidov has been a lock at number 2 on my personal rankings going back to July of last year, and he never budged. He was, to the end, a bit closer to number 1 than he was to number 3 in my list. I think that this is a player with absolutely game-breaking upside. The puck handling is the best that I've ever scouted, and he can break open a game at any time, and he has the combination of confidence and intelligence and awareness to make that happen and to use his line mates intelligently to create high-end offensive chances. His off-puck movement is elite. He's able to find soft ice. He has excellent habits on his rotations in the offensive zone. And while, yes, we have almost exclusively only seen him play at the MHL level, which is a subpar junior league there in Russia, probably a lot closer to like the J20 in Sweden or the U20 in Finland than it is to any CHL league, even the QMJHL. Still, the high-end skill here is impossible to deny. I think Ivan Demidov has the upside to be the most impactful skater the Montreal Canadiens have had this millennium, and I don't think that that's overly a stretch either. The upside is utterly fantastic. He is able to combine that elite level skill with elite level intelligence and some fantastic habits on both sides of the puck. He has a high motor. He gets to the dangerous areas. He's able to read defensive structures and find incredibly creative solutions to the problems he encounters. And even at the MHL level, he was finding ways to challenge himself. Despite being a 2-point-a-game player who was just far too good for that environment last season, he was able to challenge himself by finding complex solutions to the relatively simple problems that you encounter on a game-to-game basis in that league. And I really think he was still able to round out his game and explore his own game at that level which required a lot of intelligence and creativity to do. So one of the players that I've been most excited by in watching in the past couple drafts, and I think that give him a year's time and he's going to be a fantastic professional player in North America. Whether he needs 1 year in the AHL to adapt or not remains to be seen. I think if he plays the entirety of this upcoming season still at the NHL level, immediately jumping from there to the NHL would be a big leap, but maybe having half a season in the AHL between that could really help him adapt to the North American game and be an impactful top 6 piece out of the gate for the Montreal Canadiens. At 21st overall, they picked another fantastic player in Michael Hage, a player that was really jumping between my 12th overall and 18th overall slots for most of the tail end of the draft year. This is a guy that has elite level skill. I think he's one of the players that also was able to improve the most as the season went on, and beyond just the on ice like improvements that he did, whether it be increased ability in his defensive sequences and applying pressure, or being able to leverage his high degree of offensive intelligence and like elite level offensive tools, from his skating to his puck handling to his creativity and his shot to create offense. But also in terms of the off ice components, it's not at all surprising that this is a player who had a bit of a slow start last draft year season, because he lost his father in the offseason. There was an incredible amount of emotion going into it, and he missed almost his entire draft -1 season to injury. There was an incredible amount of adversity that this young man had to go through, and to do what he did at the USHL level, dragging a Chicago Steel team throughout the back half of the season as probably the best player in the entire USHL in that back half. Just very impressive things. And to be drafted by his childhood team, the Montreal Canadiens, just makes it all the more poetic. And he's off to a fantastic development program at the University of Michigan. I think this is a player that has high-end top 6 potential. I think there's first line upside here if he really hits. And I think to add that type of profile at the 21st overall selection is tremendous value. And the Montreal Canadiens did really, really nicely to trade up from 26th overall to the 21st overall slot, because Michael Hage would not have fallen down to 26. And the gap between him and the other forwards that would have been available at 26th overall was significant. And yeah, that was the day one. And by that point, in my eyes, the Montreal Canadiens had already hit a home run at the 2024 draft class. And everything beyond that was just a bonus. But on day 2, they still made some really interesting swings. They went for an interesting player in Atos Koivu in the 3rd round, who obviously is the son of Saku Koivu. He's an intelligent two-way centerman with some really good defensive zone habits. He has a really hard shot. He's a good half-wall shooter. I still have a lot of questions about his projection to the pro ranks, but he was able to really develop so much in his draft year season that projection could be really interesting long-term. He was playing U18 Finland junior hockey at the beginning of last season and ended up playing some games in Liga by the end of the year, which is a tremendous a gap in quality of competition to rise up through. And I think that there is definitely an NHL future for him if he's able to continue to fill out his frame, refine his habits, find his niche in being an impactful offensive player. I think the shot is really good. I don't know if it's going to carry him into a second line role, but as a potential middle 6 two-way centerman with a variety of interesting habits on both sides of the puck, and obviously the hockey lineage, I think that Koivu is an interesting selection, even though it was a little bit higher than I would have swung on him. But clearly the Habs are in love with this player, and their new like a European player development person in the organization is also based in the same city where Koivu's playing. So you're going to get a lot of hands-on development time for this player, which I think is going to serve him really, really well. And his work ethic is fantastic as well. So interesting player, interesting swing in the 3rd round. The next player they picked in the 3rd round was Logan Sawyer, a high motor, really skilled offensive winger who played in the AJHL and BCHL for the Brooks Bandits last season, a team that swapped leagues in the middle of the year. And he was a player that popped off in every single viewing that I had. He always stood out when he was on the ice, constantly trying to leverage his skill and intensity and intelligence to create offense on a consistent basis. The defensive habits are still going to need a little bit of improvement, but he's off to Providence College in the NCAA, which is a program that does a lot of work on refining defensive habits in their players. And I think that Logan Sawyer is going to be in really good hands in that program. Owen Protz, the 4th round selection for the Montreal Canadiens, is an incredibly violent left shot defenseman who played for the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL last season. And he's really intelligent with how he leverages that violence as well. He picks and chooses his spots, but when he wants to go in for a hit, he goes all in. A very fun player on the defensive side of the puck that I think the Montreal Canadiens are rather happy to have in the same organization that's developed both Jack-Eye brothers as well. Later on in the draft, the Habs went and swung on Tyler Thorpe, a 6'5", 212-pound right winger who scored 44 points in 51 games for the Vancouver Giants in the WHL as a D+1. A massive frame, pretty good curl and drag shot off the rush. Interesting frame to swing on. Mikos Vekvanags is an interesting goaltender that the Habs drafted as well. He played 9 games in the Latvian Pro League last season, where he put up a .908 save percentage, and he's 6'3". He's off to Acadie Bathurst in the QMJHL this upcoming season, where he'll be getting some more hands-on work as well from the Habs development staff by being nearby, relative to Latvia at least. And an interesting swing to take on a goaltender. They also picked Ben Merrill, a 6'4", 194-pound centerman with a really hard shot, who was playing U.S. high school hockey last season, where he logged 37 points in 25 games for St. Sebastian's, and he's off to Penticton in the BCHL before he's going to make that leap to the NCAA the year afterwards. One of my favorite late-round picks for the Habs was Makar Kanin, a dynamic and really, really fun offensive winger. He's a D+1 right wing. He's 6 feet, 161 pounds, and he scored 27 points in 35 VHL games, which is Russia's second-tier pro league. I call it the AHL of Russia, even though the quality of play is significantly lower than the AHL is, obviously. But still, to be playing at that level as a dynamic, undersized 19-year-old, 18, 19-year-old, and to be flashing the level of skill and entertainment and creativity that he did, there's a reason that Nick Bobrow called him Demidov Light in his post-draft interview. And the last pick of the draft is another draft +1 player, 6'2" left shot defenseman Rasmus Bergqvist, who was playing in the J20 Nacional last season in Sweden, and he logged 12 points in 36 games. He's a smooth skating two-way defenseman. Wasn't on my personal list in terms of my rankings, but a player that the Habs clearly like in terms of his intelligence and his potential as a potential bottom pair guy long term. But that wraps up the 2024 draft breakdown. But we're going to jump right into the overall prospect pool, and that's where things get even spicier because in my opinion, the draft class deserves an A grade, but the overall prospect pool probably gets an A+. There's so much to be excited for if you are a Montreal Canadiens fan. But first, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. If you want last-minute tickets, Game Time is the place to be. With Game Time, you can get awesome last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% on whatever event you are interested in attending, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, whatever it is that you are interested in, Game Time has you covered. Game Time also offers awesome zone deals where you pick the zone or the section and Game Time selects the seat for you for added potential savings, especially if you have a really tight schedule and something opens up for you last minute where you have some time to go out and do something fun to treat yourself to an event. Game Time is exactly what you need. Game Time also gives you a lowest price guarantee. If you find a better price than what is listed on Game Time, just have to show that receipt to Game Time and you will get 110% of the difference in order to go with Game Time to your event. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, let's dive straight into the prospect pool here because there is so much to dig into. This might be a bit of a quick fire round because of the sheer amount of depth that Habs have in their pool. You could probably build a future NHL lineup purely from players in the Habs system that have yet to play an NHL game. Probably would be the best lineup of all time, but it would probably be an NHL lineup once these guys all like develop to their peaks in a couple of years' time. Let's start off with the forwards because this had been the weak point in the prospect pool prior to the draft, but no longer looks like that whatsoever. With Ivan and Demidov and Michael Hage added into the fold, you get two dynamic potential top liners or top six guys. I think Demidov is almost a slam dunk top liner at the end of the day. Michael Hage, I would give about a 30% shot of being a top liner and another 40% chance of being a second liner, with the remaining 30% being a bottom six depth skill type of role. But very, very like interesting, skilled, intelligent, hardworking players that still have runway as well in their development and still have to round out some weak points in their games, but have so much to be excited for and provide a ton of potential scoring punch down the road. Beyond that, you have a variety of potential bottom six or middle six offensive pieces that aren't all going to be Habs in a couple of years' time. A lot of these guys are going to go unsigned as free agents, going to get traded because of the sheer amount of depth in this pool. I think Owen Beck is a guy that will stick with the Habs long term as a really intelligent two-way center who combines a high degree of pace and speed and intensity with defensive awareness, defensive engagement, and offensive intelligence. He reads play really well. He's able to leverage his speed to create space for himself. And while he doesn't have dynamic offensive skill, when he has space to work with, I think that he's a really, really intriguing player offensively as well. Think of him along the lines of a Paul Byron playing center long term. I think this is a guy that Habs fans are going to fall in love with once he becomes a full-time NHLer. And I mean, he already has one NHL game under his belt when he was called up as an emergency guy in Ottawa about a year and a half ago. But beyond him, you have Sean Farrell, a guy who's been developing nicely with the Laval Rocket in the AHL. Intelligent two-way winger with a real playmaking touch. Oliver Kapanen's going over to the SHL this season to develop if he doesn't crack the Habs lineup out of camp. And after that, he could be a really impactful AHL presence in Laval. A good two-way center with good goal-scoring instincts around the net. Uses his intelligence and frame really nicely to contribute to the buildup of play in all three zones, and he gets to the dangerous areas. He is able to contribute defensively as well. Really solid potential middle six centerman long term. Vincenz Rohr is a highly intense winger, can also play down the middle, and he moved from the OHL playing with the Ottawa 67s to the Swiss National League last season, where he won a national title there as a third line player. And his intensity, his grit, his intelligence are all just fantastic things to have on the ice. And I think he'll be a fantastic bottom six piece long term that you just love having out on the ice, whether it be on the penalty kill or at even strength. Philip Meshar has struggled in his development at the OHL level, but is going to look to make an impact in the AHL with Laval this upcoming season, hopefully while playing with players that can read the game at his level and find the spots that he wants to find them in as a playmaker, will allow his development to really start charging back up again. Because if he hits his upside, this is a really, really fun middle six winger, but the progression over the last 2 years is a bit of a cause for concern. And quick fire around here, we have Atos Koivu, as we mentioned in the last segment, as well as Logan Sawyer. Cedric Guindon is an intelligent centerman who can play on both ends of the ice. Luke Tuck will be making the jump to the Laval Rocket this season to provide a punch of physicality and energy as a north-south winger in a bottom six, middle six type of role. Xavier Simoneau continues to chug along his development and will hopefully be seeing some type of call-up minutes this upcoming season for the Montreal Canadiens with the intensity, intelligence, and physicality, and intelligent physicality that he brings to the equation as an undersized forward. Florian Xhekaj has been developing very nicely as well, making the leap to the AHL with his entry-level contract. I'm very curious to see how he continues to develop because he is just so violent and has a decent amount of skill and goal-scoring touch as well in his toolkit. And Makar Kanin, as I mentioned, is a dynamic Russian winger who was drafted in the 7th round this year. And Riley Kidney still in this organization as well as an intelligent and dynamic potential forward down the line. So a lot to look forward to in terms of the forward pool now, and a lot of depth more than anything. But the defensive pool is also where things stand out a lot, whether it be Lane Hudson, who one of my favorite players to scout ever. I adore this kid, and I think he's going to force his way into the NHL lineup in training camp because he's just that talented offensively, and the Habs want to build that type of talented offensive style. David Reinbacher will hopefully get a full season in the AHL with some degree of consistency in his development after a pretty rough season playing with Cloton last year in the Swiss National League, which was not a good team. And having a full season in an environment where he can learn to build chemistry with other players that will be Montreal Canadiens long term, I think will do him a lot of good. Adam Engstrom, another really, really fun and smooth skating defenseman that I think has second pairing upside. Very intelligent in how he's able to create offense. He's able to leverage his mobility on both sides of the puck in all three zones to create advantages. Logan Mailloux has a wicked shot, great handling ability and mobility. The offensive potential is really high with this guy, but obviously the defensive game still a bit of a work in progress, needs some more reps, but he could even be a third pairing NHLer this season if he cracks the lineup out of camp. We'll see what happens in that dogfight between him and Justin Barron in training camp. And we'll wrap that up with the defenseman with Bogdan Konyushkov, who is still chugging along in the KHL as the captain for Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod, playing alongside Anton Salayev. And I think that in about 2 years' time, when his contract runs up, he's going to be a shoo-in as a third pairing guy in the NHL and has second pairing upside if he really hits. And Owen Protz could be a type of hard-nosed, hard-hitting bottom pairing defenseman if he really turns out as well. I'll be curious to see how he develops with Brantford in the OHL. But moving on to the goaltenders, again, we have some elite level skill here in Jacob Fowler, one of the best goaltending prospects in the entire NHL, who was dominant for Boston College in the NCAA last season as a college freshman. He'd be looking to build off of that season this upcoming year, and I think that he's going to be the future starter of the Montreal Canadiens. Jakub Dobeš played a pretty solid second half of the season for the Laval Rocket after a pretty rough start to his professional career, and I think he's also a guy with NHL upside. And beyond him, you also have another three goaltenders that I think are interesting projects to kind of build on. In Yevgeny Volokhin, the Russian goaltender picked last year, Quentin Miller, the QMJHL goaltender picked last year, and Mikos Vekvanags, the Latvian goaltender, will be playing in the QMJHL this season. In terms of needs for this prospect pool, I don't really know what's missing. I think a lot of the pieces are now in place. A lot of it is just a waiting game now, waiting for these players to make that leap to the NHL level, maybe adding in one more top six projected forward into the prospect pool with next year's first round pick. And I mean, they have two of them. One of them might be a solid asset to trade in terms of getting a more NHL ready piece. But I think as a whole, this is an A-plus level prospect pool. There's nothing missing. There's depth. There's elite upside in all positions, whether it be at forward, on the wing, at center, lefty, right D, goaltending. Everything is here. The depth is fantastic. The future of the Montreal Canadiens is very bright, and this Kent Hughes-led management group has certainly reinvigorated the prospect pool of this lineup. But that wraps up the second segment. We'll look ahead to the 2024-25 season in the last segment, but first a quick word from our sponsors. Alrighty, let's look ahead to to next season for the Montreal Canadiens. This is a team that will be looking to take a very big step forward. You're not going to want to see the Habs in the bottom five finish yet again next year with the influx of young elite talent in the lineup and building the chemistry, the young players that are already playing in the NHL. The Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky line will have a full year to continue building that chemistry. They were one of the better lines in the NHL after the trade deadline in the regular season, with Slavkovsky really taking a leap to an almost point a game level and a real offensive fulcrum on the power play and at even strength. I'm fascinated to see how those three players continue to develop as a unit. I think Lane Hutson could be a full-time NHLer this season as well. Adding him into that fold and potentially quarterbacking that top power play would do wonders in building chemistry, because I think that the long-term top power play unit in Montreal will be consisted of those four players and Ivan Demidov. Maybe you see Kirby Dach and Michael Hage pushing to like make that top power play unit as well. But if you have those guys on your second power play unit long term, and you have that flexibility of being able to play both units relative even amount, that is beyond a luxury at the NHL level. I also think that Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook could take real steps this season. Obviously, a full healthy season for Kirby Dach would be so important for his development. He was Montreal's best player when healthy for much of the stretch that he's been a Montreal Canadian. And I think that if he's able to stay healthy this year, you're going to have two interchangeable top lines potentially. And I think if he's able to stay healthy this season, you're going to have a second line that can create almost as much offense as that first line can, with Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook potentially acquiring one more top six forward between now and the start of the season as well. There's a lot to look forward to. I also think that guys like Joshua Roy and Owen Beck could make the lineup out of training camp and kind of add a new influx of youth. While Owen Beck wouldn't be a power play contributor necessarily, Joshua Roy could be. And there's so much to look forward to in terms of the building of chemistry in this young core at the NHL level, and using the NHL as a development league in a way, and allowing these players to build that chemistry together, build those habits together, build that offensive understanding and creativity together as a unit is really exciting for the Montreal Canadiens' future. I think allowing these players to continue to make mistakes is also going to be very important. The style of hockey the Montreal Canadiens played last season was one of the more entertaining ones of any team that missed out on the playoffs. Every single game was tight and hard fought. It was dynamic on both ends of the ice. You had things to cheer for, whether you're going for either team playing in that game. There were definitely openings defensively. Montreal was not the most compact defensive structure in the league, but the offensive situations that allowed to create was more than worth that pain, and allowing players to explore their creativity, explore their offensive impact under Martin St. Louis in that fluid and modern offensive system was just so exciting. And I cannot wait to see how they build off of that this upcoming season. And to round off this segment, let's look at some of the young studs in that Montreal lineup and their point projections for the season. I'm going to be mainly focusing on the young players in this group, because most of the players on the Montreal Canadiens are very young. So Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki are almost falling into the roles of not veterans, but like senior players in this lineup. So I won't be including them, but I did include Kirby Dach because he missed the entirety of last season. I think if he can hit 20 goals and 65 points or that pace over the course of the season, we'll see if he's able to stay healthy or not. Fingers crossed he can. But I think that there's a lot of offensive production to still come out of Kirby Dach this season. Yuri Slavkovsky, I think, could really hit that 30-goal and 70-point mark this year. He's progressed incredibly in the past 6 to 8 months. And with that brand new contract that has him locked up for the next 9 seasons with the Habs, I cannot wait to see what type of leap he takes in his development. I think that if all goes well, this could be one of the premier power forwards in the entire NHL, playing versatile and adaptable top line minutes for years to come. Lane Hudson, I think if he plays a full season in the NHL, could be a 40-point guy, maybe a 10 goal type of defenseman. The goal scoring certainly a strength in his overall toolkit as well. Joshua Roy, I would love to see continue to chip away at a middle six role in the NHL. And while there's a lot of bodies in that range for the Habs, whether it be Brendan Gallagher, Josh Anderson, or Yoel Armia, players that are making a lot more money than Joshua Roy is and playing on that right wing as well, I definitely think that Joshua Roy, if given the minutes, given the opportunity, given the second power play chance as well, could be a 15 goal, 35-point guy, which would be a great step in his development. And last but not least, I think Owen Beck cracks the lineup this year. He is so refined. He's such an intelligent and capable player in whatever position he's put in. He's able to elevate any line mates he plays with. And if he ends up being like a third or fourth line center for the Habs this season, I could see him being a 10 goal, 25-point type of player, putting up solid defensive results and just being a very refined and polished rookie by NHL standards. But that wraps up this show, diving into the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool and their 2024 draft class, where they landed the elite talents of Ivan Demidov and Michael Hage. And if you're watching on YouTube, please leave us a comment. Let us know which players did I forget to mention? Did I gloss over? The Habs seemingly have over 100 prospects that deserve a mention, so I couldn't quite outline every single one in a half-hour show. But let us know what you think of the episode, which players you're expecting to take massive leaps in their development this year, which players you think are going to crack the NHL roster, and what you think they'll be able to do with a full-time NHL role this season. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It is always greatly appreciated. For your second listen of the day, go check out Locked On Sports Today, a 24-hour news show that brings you all the sporting news you could possibly want to have access to. I'm Sebastian High from Dauber Prospect. I'm Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting over at Dauber Prospects, typically joined by Hadi Kalakesh, who will hopefully be returning next week. And that wraps up the show today. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you tune back in shortly.